This is the penultimate episode of Season 1 and the end of Uhura's training aboard the Enterprise.
Time to bend some ears.
Not Spock's, I'd hope. That'd have to hurt. Pike gives a little speech and also gives a promotion to Ensign Duke, so that now, of course, he is Lieutenant Prince. Uhura is uncomfortable at the whole thing because she still hasn't made up her mind about staying in Starfleet, but Pike is called away by a message from Starfleet. And it's something that requires pulling La'an away from speaking to a therapist about that whole everyone I knew was massacred by Gorn thing. Seems the USS Peregrine activated a distress beacon and then lost contact, while in the process of making an emergency landing on a Class L planet. L as in luck, which they were shit out of if they were landing there. But the main mission is bringing necessary components to K7 in order to keep the lights on and so no one suffocates. So they're going to have to settle for just a landing party left behind while the delivery is made. Treat the wounded, try to fix the ship while they wait, and do your best not to freeze to death.
Number 1, you're good to go. We're making our descent now.
We'll monitor your approach.
That's a negative. Once we enter the upper atmosphere, we're going to be out of contact either.
Man, of all the things to crash on, you couldn't find a nice plains or plateau? No, you picked the spikiest spot on the planet. Some people. Still, that is a hell of a view. I almost would want that as my wallpaper.
This wind reminds me of Andoria.
Reminds me of going to college in Minnesota. During this, Spock accidentally calls Duke an ensign, so now he has to buy him a drink, I guess. But if this is anything like Minnesota, there should be at least 3 bars within a quarter mile of this campsite. They head to the ship, find blood, but at least the power is on, which could suggest that they made it to sickbay to get treated, since there's no bodies left here. But there are nevertheless some serious engineering problems. Not just the fact this thing is sitting on the side of a mountain, that much is obvious. No, they did some serious reworking of the systems to try and keep things running, and that took serious effort. I think we can all agree this is serious. La'an said that so far they've found 20 bodies, including the captain, but they managed to get into the logs. Seems the Peregrine picked up 3 castaways they found. Only the Orion of the trio was infested with Gorn eggs. You ought to check your scalp, that's very important. The Orion tried to end it with a grenade, but that didn't work. All it did was trigger the distress signal because the explosion happened in engineering, and that usually means we can use some help. La'an is their expert on the Gorn, so they're going to be deferring to her pretty much for all of this. Stick with someone who actually managed to survive, and maybe you will too. They do know there's 2 life signs, one human and one unknown, and I gotta say, I really hope that there's enough ammos and health packs for this level, because this looks like we're in for an ambush. And not what I had in mind. I was kind of thinking of popping out of the panels in the walls and ceiling. Uhura guesses this might be the second life form, and is actually just trying to protect the human. After lowering their weapons, he leads them to her, and while they look her over, Lieutenant Duke asks Spock to get him something to treat a burn that he got working in the Jeffries tube, which gives Spock more alone time with Chapel. While that has a small undercurrent of sexual tension, Uhura has the opposite of that with her alone time with Hemmer. She admits that she doesn't know her life path, but she realizes that's a result of being adrift.
Your real fear is putting down roots.
So now you're a ship's counselor.
I understand. It is better to leave than to be the one left behind.
That's incredibly true. Being left behind suggests one has no say in the matter, whereas the one leaving has made a choice, even if it is a painful one. Not to mention that to be left behind easily lends itself to a sense of rejection, even if that's not intended. Anyway, this kid is named Oriana, and she calls the blue guy Buckley. I thought she said buckwheat at first, so I'm tremendously disappointed that he's just Buckley. I mean, I wasn't going to go in for the Little Rascals gag. I just love the idea of all possible names to invent for an alien. It'd be buckwheat. Well, La'an shows up, and while M'Benga assures her that the readings are clean for both of them, she gives Oriana the 3rd degree about either of them being infected, and she starts laying into her for not telling the captain of the Peregrine about the eggs.
Lieutenant?
You could have saved them.
La'an, stop harassing my daughter.
Wow, it's BYOB. Bring your own baggage. Probably time for Pike to start thinking about his future with a melted face again. La'an said that the girl was reported missing 2 years ago, as she and the others were likely from a breeding planet like the one that she'd been on. But again, that makes her the expert, so she says that the Gorn that hatched are likely still here, but there are unlikely to be anyone coming along to collect them soon, so we're stuck here with them, but at least we're not stuck with a whole bunch more. Spock gets a little jumpy over the sound coming from the wind blowing through an exposed panel, and it's not helped with Pike and M'Benga coming out of nowhere. Lucky thing Spock didn't shoot anybody. Shooting either of them would be very bad. Meanwhile, Buckwheat's not doing so good. He's got some red vein shapes and ectoplasm, both of which are worrying in a patient. While Chapel goes off to compare scans, he starts chugging like he's trying to get to Coldstone Creamery before they close, and Oriana goes off to hide. Yep, we've gone full frontal xenomorph on this thing. This is obviously Star Trek Does Alien/Aliens. This makes it controversial, along with the fact that there's a question of continuity between the Gorn of Strange New Worlds and the Gorn of TOS. I know my views of Strange New Worlds are not in alignment with many of you. Some of you have made that point extremely clear. So this probably will be one more thing, but I'm actually fine with making the Gorn the big bads of Strange New Worlds. I am. Like with the redesigned Enterprise interior, I certainly get where you're coming from if it bothers you. But after seeing Voyager take the Borg and weaken them so that they could be the ongoing threat, I prefer taking the Gorn and strengthening them to make them an ongoing threat here. I should add that I haven't finished Season 2 yet, so some of you have seen more than I have. I've just been fighting bots so much lately I haven't had a chance to finish it. Yes, after watching a season of Discovery fighting malicious AI and a season of Picard fighting malicious AI, I can't watch Strange New Worlds because of malicious AI. Crap. So the Gorn Young pop out, and one attacks the red shirt. Not sure if it would be red under the jacket, but I'll play the odds. And two even attack each other. I'll bet there's at least one person reminded by that image that Thanksgiving's coming up. Oh, and also Lieutenant Duke?
I will shake your fire.
Yeah, I kind of knew he was screwed. Didn't know it was that screwed, though. Part of what I enjoy about this is that Strange New Worlds is a return to the more optimistic Federation overall. So having a horrific monster alien race as their adversary is shoving them way outside of their comfortable box. When the Borg invaded on the Next Generation, we saw the crew that was accustomed to being able to triumph due to superior power, superior morals, or superior intellect. Now they were facing an enemy where the former and the latter was the opposite, and the middle literally was irrelevant. When we recently revisited the Jem'Hadar and the search for Deep Space Nine, the Federation faced an anti-Federation, a powerful union, but united only under a paranoid race's view that security comes only through domination. So Strange New Worlds having this Neo-Gorn as an enemy is, to me anyway, part of a fine pedigree of facing the normally unflappable against something that's way outside their experience. La'an shows up in sickbay where Chapel survived by hiding behind a medical force field. She explains that the Gorn practice Siblicide. The hatched young fight each other so that only the strongest will survive, so that limited resources will be given to the one with the greatest chance to make it to adulthood. It's something that appears especially in birds. The most common example given is the blue-footed booby, which is kind of ironic because when one thinks of booby, having only one is not what normally springs to mind. Well, the Gorn can't stand the cold, which is why La'an knows Oriana is hiding in the coldest part of the ship. The reason the others died outside was to lure the Gorn out there so they'd perish in the cold. It worked. There was no planning for another batch, though. While they discuss hunting down the Gorn and finishing them off, Uhura and Hemmer get things back online. But just when something bad is happening. There's a smell of human blood in the air, and that's never good. And Sam Kirk is worked up about being trapped in here with a Gorn.
I could give him a sedative.
Hell, I'll take one if you're offering. Frickin' bots. Pike tells everyone to group up in sickbay, but there's clearly something in engineering with Hemmer and Uhura.
Okay, so she's a dog.
Hemmer gets spat on, which isn't good even when they're not an alien, and Sam loses it when Spock comments on the Gorn's impressive ability for evasion, against scans and Hemmer's telepathy. But La'an has an idea. Use the cold to herd the Gorn to where they can then engage them on their terms. It's off to a good start, but it's drawn to aggression, because it's seeking to show dominance, of course, and this is Spock we're talking about, who is rarely more than sarcastic. But he taps into his anger over what happened to Duke and runs down there screaming, which gets it screaming, which draws in the other one, and the two start, duking it out, until there's only one left. Then La'an goes in.
It's just you and me! Fight me! Come on, fight me! Ah!
Am I the only one wondering if this is what dating her is also like? She goads it into chasing her and hides in a crate, knowing that the Gorn will try to break it open. But that puts it right in the path of the trap, blasting with enough cold to freeze it solid. Well, mostly. It looks like it was still a little gooey in the middle. This leads to my one objection with these Gorn, and that is that Hemmer is infected with eggs because it spat on him. It's not because of what happens because of that. It's because that so far I could accept the sci-fi horror aspect of it because there was internal logic to it. But having the young capable of asexual reproduction in a species where siblicide takes place is self-contradicting. The whole point of that is so that only the most fit survive, preserving resources for the one who is the fittest, so it can then breed and make the species as a whole stronger. This method allows for the weak to reproduce, and in so doing, create further Gorn to use up resources that should go to the alpha. The reason they've done this is because we need Hemmer to be infected, because the eggs then hatching soon means that something has to be done about it, and considering there's no time to remove it, well, you can guess how that's sorted out. To save the others, he chooses to sacrifice himself. And hey, don't get me wrong, it's a very moving death scene. Hemmer has been a great character, and it's very sad to see him go. But he does meet his end on his own terms, with his purpose fulfilled, to fix what is broken. And it's especially relevant because he does help Uhura to realize what it is she's going to do. But things aren't over. At the funeral, Spock heads off because the rage he let out, he's having trouble putting back. Never fits quite right back into the box once you take it out. And La'an is leaving to return Oriana to her family, even though she's not sure where that is, and it's outside Federation space, too. But that's okay. Pike gives her a leave of absence to run this little chase. We could probably get an episode out of it at least. I didn't really get into this with Lift Us Up Where Suffering Cannot Reach because I was too busy stewing over the rationalization of child suffering. When a work is quite clearly based upon another, what matters is what the new work brings to it. Bob Dylan and Jimi Hendrix both have great versions of All Along the Watchtower. Dylan's use of a harmonica versus Hendrix's use of a guitar. Both bring it something magical. Lift Us Up was from a story with something to say, and it had nothing new to say. The mystery was something original and was well carried out, so that worked for it, but the way it sang the song wasn't moving. All Those Who Wander is, as established, a version of Alien/Aliens, and in this case, it's like a singer who shows their range. It still feels like Star Trek, yet it captures the atmosphere of a sci-fi horror flick. What does it bring to this? It brings the exposure of characters we know to situations beyond their experience. Say for La'an, of course. It's not about the plot. It's about the song. It's not what's happening. It's who it's happening to and how they cope with it. That's the strength of All Those Who Wander, and that's why I like it. Bye.